Hello, it's Donovan with A2D again. Today we're doing an undercoating training video. So this is a general overview of how we do undercoatings, kind of the process, and mostly just safety. So that's the biggest thing we're gonna go over in this video, is how to be safe in lifting a vehicle, in our practices under the vehicle, and what to consider as we're going. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to explain is safely lifting a vehicle. I can't go as in-depth as I would like to in this video, but there is a lift safety training video that we have everybody watch, and you must watch this before you lift a vehicle. So we've safely lifted this vehicle here using our lift. It's mounted properly. We raised it a little bit, shook it. As it's up now, we're looking at the lift points and making sure nothing's moving or sliding or creaking, making sure that everything looks as even as possible, and that our weight balance is on point. So with that being said, if you're just starting out, be sure to be with someone who can double check your work, who's lifted vehicles before just deciding to do this on your own. That's all right. Now I want to show you the tools and equipment we have for performing undercoatings. So there's several different things we're going to use. I'm just going to quickly go through the things off the top of my head that I know we use every time. First, there's a bag of rags under here. These are just crappy rags that we've used on other stuff, and they have contaminants in them, and things that we don't want to wipe onto nice vehicles that are being coated or whatever the case may be. So we use these for undercoatings now, and they remove, they're used for everything, the whole dirt removal, the whole process, removing undercoating from different things, overspray, etc. So those are kept behind here. Then we have this whole cart. So obviously it's full of junk. We've been just non-stop here, so we're busting through cars, but normally you've got your undercoating, your paint thinner to clean out guns if necessary, some tar remover, some IPA, just anything you could possibly need over here. We got full face respirators to protect your face from getting undercoating on it. We try to keep everything as clean as possible. Obviously, throughout the job, we're just touching undercoating. We're wiping it all over everything. So just about every week, we like to wipe everything down. Make sure that all of our bottles, all of our masks, everything is clean. Because the more dirty your tools are, the more you're going to be spreading that undercoating across everywhere. These are our refill jugs for our wax oil undercoating. We're using wax oil right now. It's a wax-based undercoating, so we'll get into that a little more later. But we have all kinds of light, and yeah, we just want to make sure that we can see everything. So using headlamps, using this stand-up light, for example. This one is great for shining on the whole undercarriage, or a section of it at a time usually. And yeah, we want to make sure all of our tools are covered. That's why we've got this plastic here. When we start spraying undercoating, we're going to move this plastic down and cover all these tools so we don't get overspray on them. So cleanliness is super important. Oftentimes, because we're kind of in this corner here and we close the curtain, we will point the fan out the back door, put something in front of that fan so we can't, blow undercoating onto whatever's parked back there. And yeah, we just want some exhaust going through the little bay here for undercoatings. That overspray though is gnarly. It'll get on everything. So make sure we cover the fan is super important. As far as the floor goes, like I said, we've been non-stop, but just about every week or maybe more often, we want to scrub this floor. So what we'll do is we'll take a hard bristle brush or some kind of broom and some floor degreaser, and we'll pressure wash the floor after sweeping and make sure we scrub everything so we get all this undercoating that's dripped onto the floor up, because the floor does get kind of sticky back here. And yeah, that's the undercoating bay and all the tools you need. Okay, now we're gonna look at this undercarriage. So we removed the spare tire, took it off of here. you got to go through the back for that. All vehicles are different, so just look up how to do it on each particular vehicle if you're not familiar. But we removed the spare tire because there's a lot of exposed metal here that we normally couldn't reach with the spare installed. And Jason is removing other panels for the same purpose, to access areas that have exposed metal. So for example, up here, I'll show you. We want to remove, if you'll come up here, Cam, want to remove pieces like this. It's just a decorative piece, and this is aluminum, so it's not something we're really going to want to spray, especially because it is presentable. We want it to be presentable when it's done, but that was sitting right here on all of this exposed metal, so we want to cover all of this. So we're going to be removing a couple pieces, and next I'll show you what to cover and what not to cover with plastic in preparation for spraying. So I wanted to mention one thing about this cover. So this is actually both a cover and the straps for the gas tank. So it's not only covering and protecting the gas tank, but it's also holding it up. This one happens to be metal, so we're going to coat this. But in most cases, if it wasn't the strap and it was just the plastic cover that often comes down, we will remove it. However, in this case, it includes the straps. So if you took this off, the gas tank would kind of just be free-flowing and could fall down, especially if it's full. There's a lot of fluid in there. So yeah, just wanted to mention that. So what's super important on the undercarriage is to understand what you do and do not want to coat. So I'm just going to kind of go front to back what I see visually on what we are going to cover with plastic and what we're going to coat. So each vehicle's different, like I said about the spare tire situation. Please get that double checked and get this double checked, what you're covering and what you're coating on every vehicle. Sometimes on the work order it will mention this guy wants this in particular coated, and we're going to look at that before we start taping everything. But the things that we don't want coated, we do want to cover very thoroughly. So I'll show that, or at least explain that in a second here. So just observations from what I can see right here. I know that we do not want to coat shock absorbers. So shock absorbers, axles, usually tie rods, springs and struts, you know, stuff like that. Moving suspension components, they have a tendency to stick with this waxy undercoating, and we've had experiences where it could make it pop and make kind of weird sounds that customers just don't like. It won't really hurt anything, but also some people really like their suspension components to be presentable. So these are kind of nicer struts, and once we clean it up, we're going to cover it so it can't get any overspray on it. And we'll go all the way up and clean all the way up into the spring, but we're not going to coat the spring. It's red. A lot of customers like to see that red, the contrast. So that's one great example. As we move back, I'm noticing drivetrain components. So we have a front transfer case here for or front differential, or whatever you want to call this. But this is what goes to the axles. So we don't want to spray this. We want it to be able to be worked on. We want to consider not only what the customer wants to see, but also what the next mechanic that's working on the vehicle is going to want to see. Oil pan, motor, transmission, second transfer case. We don't want to cover, we don't want to coat these things. We want to cover them up before we start spraying, or at least avoid them while spraying, because they are also components that need to be worked on. It's not uncommon for this needs to drop, this to need to come apart, and just going back in the drivetrain, now I'm seeing some exhaust pipes that are kind of in the way. We're going to want to cover those as well. Any overspray that gets on those, it's going to burn up pretty quickly after you start the vehicle for the first time, if there is overspray, and it's going to make a bad smell. Customer's not going to like that. That is along the whole underside of the vehicle, so just pay attention to what you're spraying. Same thing with the drive shaft. It's not going to make a smell, but it will throw the weight off. So these are specifically balanced at the factory and tailor-made to these vehicles. If we throw off the weight on that at all, it could cause vibrations, it could cause major issues. Getting back to the rear differential, we usually do spray the rear differential. If they have a decorative cover on the back, we won't, because obviously it's decorative for a reason, but in this case it's all factory, and we will spray this just to prevent it from flaking apart and rusting. And yeah, other moving suspension components, these rear shock absorbers, and they have an extra little tank here too for additional fluid. We want to cover those. These are another part of I would call it a custom suspension system. It might come from the factory, but it looks presentable, it looks custom. It's supposed to be kind of fancy. So we're just gonna clean that up real nice as we're cleaning the rest of it, and then we're gonna cover that before we spray. Same situations, a lot of other stuff. And yeah, not much else is moving, but the last thing I want to mention, if you can come back here and take a look at the back of this differential, there's a sticker right here. This sticker is another example of something we don't want to touch in consideration of the next person who's working on the vehicle. So if they need a part number for this cover or whatever this assembly is here, just the rear differential, usually they'll be able to scan this and order the part, no problem. But without this, they have to go look it up in the computer, blah, 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 blah. So we just want to cover these stickers, and all we'll do is put a piece of tape over that and spray around it, and then when we're done, we're going to remove the tape. So those are most of the moving components. There's more springs here with some bump stops in there. We don't want to spray that. Another moving component. If it's got a lot of travel, it could start sticking and then popping apart. Like I mentioned before, don't want to do that. There's other components, things like computers you just have to be thinking about especially in the prep process. But for the most part, all the exposed metal you can see under this vehicle is going to get coated. So that, you know, examples of things we wouldn't coat in regards to exposed metal would be things like this heat shield. This typically won't rust out, but we might do a little spot on this bolt. So we'll just make sure that we can get, you know, that bolt covered. Obviously it's starting to rust, so we want to clean everything up and then make sure that we can get that covered. And we'll do our best to spray under the heat shield as well. Now, yeah, let's move on to the prep process. Okay, so this is a great example of a spot that we want to prep properly before we start spraying our undercoating. So the prep process is the most important part. It's what's going to allow this undercoating to actually perform. This rust is kind of starting to flake apart. It's just surface rust at this point, but that layer of paint that they put on from the factory is starting to flake off, and we don't want to allow anything to trap moisture and rust from the inside out. So we're going to take a wire brush in the prep process and remove any flake or flaking paint off of here, so that we know our undercoating is going to cover as even of a surface as possible, as evenly as possible, and stay protecting this for a while instead of this flaking off and then there being an exposed piece. So that's why we remove the flaking rust. Okay, so the next steps in the process are going to be cleaning, drying, and masking off. So as I already explained, we're going to be masking off different materials, different parts of the vehicle and the undercarriage and components under here that cannot get sprayed for whatever given reason. But first we have to clean and then we have to dry. You can't spray it on a wet surface. It will not look right. It's really not going to affect the performance of the coating, but it won't look perfect like we promised to the customers. So first, we're going to be cleaning. To clean, we're going to use various different chemicals, such as degreaser, iron remover, any sort of soaps, lubrication for our brushes, just things that'll agitate the dirt and take them out. And we'll also use various brushes and rags, and also the pressure washer. So we're going to drag the hose of the pressure washer over here, make sure we spray from one end to another, in every crack, in every crevice. And yeah, after everything's clean and you've sprayed chemical, you've agitated, and then sprayed again to make sure everything falls down onto the ground, we will dry. So oftentimes, if you could get the prep done before lunch on any given day, you can go to lunch, allow it to air dry, and then come back and spray with compressed air, get all those tight cracks that weren't going to dry over lunch, and wipe anything else out. At that stage, you will IPA wipe, so isopropyl alcohol is just used to get any oils or residues or anything that we didn't get with that initial prep procedure off, and make sure that we have a nice, proper bond with between our undercoating and the surfaces we're spraying. Once it's dried and IPA'd, we can start the spraying process, which is a whole nother story, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay, next thing I want to explain is the masking process. So what we're going to use typically is plastic garbage bags, sheets of plastic, sometimes cardboard, just anything that will protect your components on the undercarriage. Usually we'll stick that all together with tape, and for example, on this wheel, we don't want to spray the wheel itself or any of the tire or any of the braking system. So brakes are a big liability. It's obviously the safest. It's one of the biggest safety items on a vehicle. You need to be able to stop. So we're going to cover the entire wheel with a garbage bag, wrap it around all these braking components. Usually, you know, there is a shield here, but sometimes there's not. And yeah, you want to cover the caliper on the backside here. You want to cover everything. So just fully encompassing this entire wheel and braking system up to the axle with a piece of plastic is typically how we'll do that. And we'll just kind of copy that procedure for every other component. So we'll wrap a piece of plastic around the shocks, including the springs, but this is all after it's cleaned. Keep that in mind. We don't want to mask anything off in advance. They all need to be cleaned first. And yeah, so just copy that for things like the axles, things like other drivetrain components, everything else I already mentioned. But we got to make sure that's thoroughly done. And yeah, I can't stress enough the importance of a proper masking job, because it will take you at least twice as long after you're done to clean those pieces off than it did to cover them in the first place. So that's good. Okay, next thing I wanted to show you was the sprayer. So we're going to be using this sprayer for the black wax undercoating. This is a wax oil brand sprayer designed to use with their product. So this little nozzle sprays evenly. It's pretty nice. It's just handheld on every single part. And it is kind of tunable. You can tune airflow, you can tune the product flow, and how far you can pull the trigger, stuff like that. But really it should be set when you get here, and you should be able to ask anyone who's already working on undercoatings to help you tune this if you need to change anything. But one of the most important things to consider when you're using the sprayer is the air pressure. So on the black wax undercoating, we're going to be between 35 and 40 psi, which is very low, but we changed that at the regulator on the airline. Now, the reason we do that is because we want a nice, even and smooth application. We don't want it to be kind of spitting out. We don't want it to be blowing itself around, because it comes out as a liquid. But once it sits on there and it air dries for about an hour, it will look super smooth as long as you apply it right. And that's part of what makes our customers want these undercoatings, is because we can actually make them presentable. It's not a rough surface, it's smooth, but it's even coverage. The other thing you're going to be doing would be spraying the cavity protection. I don't know where the sprayer's at for that one, but it's similar to this. It's got a similar spray nozzle and a similar trigger mechanism. The can is just a little bit smaller. And yeah, we use the, oh, perfect, thanks Jason. So we use this nozzle for that. This one kind of sprays it in a mist, and what we're doing in that cavity protection is we're misting inside panels. So for example, the inside of a door, and you want to make sure the window's up when you do this, because you don't want to spray the window, but you'll stick this up in there kind of into different parts, different cracks inside the door, and you'll pull the trigger once it's in there, you know, a couple second pull, and then let it go, find another spot, a couple seconds, and you should be done with that door. But that's just our cavity protection. It's actually a clear liquid that goes in, and yeah, that just prevents certain panels from rusting from the inside out. You can also use the cavity protection for certain areas that are really hard to get to in the undercarriage, such as a frame that's not very exposed. And yeah, so that's the sprayer. Oh, and with this cavity protection, you want to be at a higher PSI, so make sure to ask what PSI to be at from whoever's training you. Make sure you ask what PSI to be at for your cavity protection. To my understanding, usually it's around 70 PSI. So we'll go from there. Okay, last couple things in this video I want to go through. When we're done spraying, and obviously, you know, this is not a finished product right now, we can maybe insert some pictures or video of a finished product into this video, but yeah, once we're done spraying, we're going to want to de-tape and demask everything that we taped and masked. So we're going to remove all the plastic, all the tape, all the cardboard, the paper, whatever we put on here. We're going to take it off, and it will hit certain components that you don't want to have undercoating on them. So then we have to clean everything off, especially things that are visible from the outside or things that will cause a smell, like the exhaust. And yeah, once everything's cleaned off, we need a final check. So on every service we offer, and I will say this in most of the videos that we're filming here, after you've gone through the checklist, double check the work order details, make sure that everything is up to the customer's standards at the best of your ability based on what you know. Get a final check, another opinion, and that person should also read the work order, make sure you didn't miss anything, and they should take a flashlight and go around after you took a flashlight and went around and checked everything. And yeah, once that's finished and you are approved on the final check, the vehicle can be lowered after our after pictures, because we usually take before and after pictures on undercoatings, and all of that's in the checklist. So just double check that checklist every single time. But yeah, after those after pictures, we can lower the vehicle, and once we lower it and it's off the lift, we can spray the lift points. So these lift points do have rust on them, and they are also exposed metal. So, but we can't spray them now because it's on the lift. So once it's off the lift, we can move those arms out, and we can spray those lift points right under the pad there. And we'll do that for all 4 pads on every vehicle. And yeah, after that, and your final check, you should be done with your undercoating. But as I've mentioned, please get everything double checked by whoever's training you or the quality control person at the time, and make sure that yeah, everything you did was up to par, especially on your first few. And I'll push this again. Read the work order. That should be all for this video. And thanks for watching. Hopefully you succeed in undercoatings.